All right, welcome back to Investor Edge, simplifying smarter investing for everyone. I'm your host Trent. Today is Monday, February 10th. I'm going to be talking about an update in my swing positions, along with a little broad market review, things to consider going into this week. This will be a pretty quick video. I'm going to just kind of pull up my charts and talk about what I'm looking at. I'm not sure if I'm going to have time Wednesday or not to do my normal midweek kind of recap, so I'm doing it early, but mainly because I did take a new position today, along with closing a position in my swings, and I just want to talk about my reasoning behind that. As disclaimer per usual, this is for educational purposes only. I'm not a financial advisor. Please do not listen to me. I lose money, I make money. I have my strategies. I hope you can learn from me. I do have quite a few years of experience, both short-term trading and long-term. But financial markets are risky. Do not put any money in the market that you cannot afford to lose, and do your own research. So that being said, let's pull up the notes real quick. Okay. Current swing positions long. I'm long on everything I talked about in previous videos. I still maintain a long bias or bullish bias with cautious optimism. There are some things that could rattle the markets that could swing that. But currently, while earnings guidance and things like that hasn't been great in some of the bigger stocks, which has dragged certain areas of the market, we've seen a lot of defensive stocks do well. And ultimately, tech and things like that, they've been recovering strongly. That's why I added a couple of tech things to my watch list going into this week. Probably won't take any positions in those yet, just because it has earnings, and I want to wait for more convincing buying opportunities. I don't generally like to play breakout type stuff. I'd rather it come to me in the levels that I've identified or that the charts identify and have follow through with. So that being said, current positions are Meta. I'm at 704.62. I talked about in previous videos. You can see where I bought that at. KGC I was holding. Got a good pop this morning. It opened up at like 12.19 and sold off a little bit. I closed it right around 12.15 or at $12.15. Earnings are soon. Did I get the full size that I wanted, or profits that I wanted? No. I didn't really care for the sell-off too much. I thought it was going to have a little bit more conviction to the upside. It kind of was trading sideways. If earnings wasn't in a couple days, I may have stayed in it a little more, but I'll take it. 2-3 day hold. Just under 4% for my 1170 position. It's profit, right? I'll take it. Generally, for my swings, I shoot for anything 4 to 10%. Ideally, anything higher than that's always great too, right? But to be consistent in the market and to play off the areas I look at, you can always re-enter. And my swings, I never look for huge, giant, home run type positions. It's always trying to make short-term profits with high conviction, with low risk to the downside. That's how you stay in it, and that's name of the game. Things change quickly, as we've all seen, so you got to really consider that. GE, I still maintain. I'm in at 202.48. It's pretty flat today. Ideally, fingers crossed, we should be consolidating. It's maintaining its positions, above that 200 level, which is pretty key. I'd like to see it break 206 and see if we can't get some continued upside. Same with Meta. It's been pretty volatile up around that 720 area. I believe it's still kind of around that. I don't know what it closed at today, but I know it's up a little bit from my entry. The newest one. So I didn't buy actual shares. I actually purchased calls that are a few weeks out of the money. And my main reason for that is I didn't have enough capital to hold that position at the size that I wanted to at this moment. I have a lot tied up with my long-term portfolio, and I have to maintain because I do actively day trade every day. So I liked the risk to reward opportunity. I liked where the options were at. I was buying them as the market was, or as JPMorgan was looking soft, fading down to that 270, and I'll show you what I'm looking at as a potential bounce area. And what's interesting with call, or with options in general, well, time is against you, but it's a weird scenario that can happen, and it kind of leads into my bias. When options, even though the underlying stock price may be maintaining a certain level, but the options are rising, right? You're seeing continued buying pressure going into those, and that's what can happen. So that's the beauty, but also the downside. So, don't trade options unless there's a lot of great videos and information out there. It's definitely something you have to really consider your risk with. I go in at the size that I'm willing to lose on an individual trade with, as if I was entered in that with full position. But I'm trading purely off the options. I always look for a couple weeks out, and generally slightly out of the money of a current range that's already in. But ideally, you got to look at volume too. So there's a lot of things to consider with options. Don't get involved with options until you're a little bit more comfortable with the markets. Okay, just recap a little bit of today, general broad market stuff. Markets experienced gains despite recent tariff announcements by Trump. S&P 500 rose by almost 1%. Dow was up by about 0.5%. And tech looked pretty strong. Again, talking about cautiously optimistic with a bullish bias. A lot of people were, a couple weeks ago, tech was selling off big. It may still, right? But you can't trade off of what you think is going to happen. You have to go off of what you're seeing, and again, earnings, things like that. Tech and all this stuff, there was a little bit of rotation going on. It kind of flattened out a little bit last week with a strong close. If you look at it on a monthly time frame, January closed pretty strong. A broad-based tech industry, going into February. So, and that's why I added a couple things to my watch. That was up today. Primarily driven by strong performers, major techs, NVDA and Broadcom. Additionally, U.S. steel aluminum producers saw significant stock surges following the tariff news. That played into factor. It's going to play into factor a lot, so keep that in mind if you're in anything that is affected by that. Key factors to watch out for this week. We have CPI report on Wednesday. Inflation data will be critical, especially if it surprises upside or downside, right? I think they're going to be maintaining their hold on that. So, I don't think there's too much to worry about. Listening to a lot of different analysts and stuff, they're all kind of in the same boat. But if rate hikes, do resurface, which I don't really think so. You can look up the exact, analyst view on that. But they impact things, right? So it's just something to keep in mind if you're going to be trading anything that could be affected by these type of reports. Tech and financial sectors are under the spotlight. We have some major players, PANW, Palo Alto Network, ANET was Applied Materials Technologies, and CSCO reporting this week. Guidance could create sector-wide ripple effects, networking, NVDA, JPM, again, financial type stuff. All that could definitely be impacted by those earnings coming out. PANW, I'll definitely be day trading. I have it on my watch list for swings. I won't enter anything prior to earnings. I definitely want to see how earnings plays out. Hopefully, in my opinion, if earnings is strong, but guidance, again, might be weak like some of the other ones, we might see this quick sell-off down into the levels that I'm going to be looking at on a longer time frame, and that's when I'll be interested about getting long on something. So, but we'll see, right? All right, so for Meta and GE, holding as long as they maintain, this is just kind of my notes for my current positions along with what I'm ideally looking for and everything else. Meta and GE holding as long as they maintain support near their Anchored VWAPs. I use a 2-day Anchored VWAP to kind of just trail me, and I want to see how it's reacting to that. Is it consistently closing above that, below that? Is it consolidating in between the longer one, like the 1 week level, and that? And obviously price action and all that stuff. I try to focus on a little bit slower time to let the stock really work and, go from there. Obviously, if it gaps down or something, right, everything changes. But just let that stock kind of do what it does. They don't go straight up. They don't go straight down. You got to let them, let the institutional buyers push them around as they want and try to trade within that trend, whatever direction it may be. However, Meta breakout above 720 could signal continuation. There's been a lot of confluence up there at the 720 level, so we're going to watch for that. GE, ideally, obviously, I want it to stay above 200, 201, just for reference, but I really want to see that one start to continue to grind in the right, in the upward direction. For everything else, tech heavy stuff, patience where I'm at. I got to remind myself. NVDA popped pretty good today, right? That's kind of brought the market back up. It's now re-entering that zone of that previous gap down that we saw a couple weeks ago. Definitely, there's a lot of people taking positions in it, talking about it. A lot of people trying to short it. NVIDIA is a tricky one, just like everything, right? It's a very hot stock. It reacts news heavy, but when it moves up or moves down, it moves pretty strong, right? With strong conviction. Ideally, I would, if it doesn't get to the levels that I would have liked to buy in, oh well, right? There's plenty of other things to do. Find the strategies that work for you. I don't want to just trade something because it broke this week's, last week's high, and just hold it, right? I want to see it respond to those levels and see if there's some true buying power at those levels and retest. But I could miss it, right? It's what happens. You're not going to get everything. But if you're more aggressive than I am, by all means, go for it. JPM presents a solid long side. Yeah, this is the one I got into. A little bit steeper of a decline than I anticipated or would have ideally liked. I would have liked to see it over a 2-day period. But it's getting up there. It's pretty high. But I got a pretty short risk to it. Again, I got options. I got just few contracts with my overall size. But they closed up pretty strong. I'm already up like 20% or something on my call options. And again, that's just because the way options inherently work. They're just different. So I already like that. I like that the options closed strong, even though the stock price didn't necessarily. I like what I saw with that close for me in my position. For ANET, I really, would like to see a pullback. It's also gapped pretty strong. It's consolidating. We could see continuation. By all means, watch that. If you see that break, if you like it, for sure you could buy in that. I don't typically trade breakouts unless it's really high conviction, much bigger. And I could break that down in a better video. A lot of times breakouts tend to fail if they're purely technical unless they have a really, really big driver behind them, right? Earnings or news or catalyst. Something's got to be there. The times they work when they're technical is when they're on high relative volume or if it's over a really long period of time. Really longer. Like if something's consolidating for like a 6-month channel and then it breaks that level, okay, that's high conviction. But ANET, a lot of these stocks, they gap all the time. So like what's the conviction behind it? They're not really gapping out of big levels. But they have big ranges. And again, a lot of people trade within that. Is it going to be something I do? Probably not. But definitely to continue to watch. And if it starts to, even if it breaks and then reconsolidates going into the next couple weeks, if things are still looking strong and the markets haven't changed drastically, then I'll be looking to, participate in that. Okay, now let's pull up the charts. It's over here somewhere. There we go. So let's talk about ANET first. So these are 60-minute candles. I have the red line is a 2-week Anchored VWAP from. It happens to be on the Monday, which I really like. That works out good. Sometimes I'm not going to do exactly on a Monday for the longest time frame, but it's going to be of a key level, and it broke above. That was the same day. That was the big gap down across the tech sector, fueled by that DeepSeek and NVIDIA and other sell-off. So it's now broken above that. It's put in a higher high, higher lows across multi-day time frames. As you can see, a few different areas, consolidation, breakup, and we're now above this 20 level, pretty strong. But if you notice, the volume, right, is kind of cooling. Meanwhile, price is rising. That's good. It's kind of up, but it could break to the downside. So there's going to be sellers at some point. Either people that got in at these levels, they're going to be taking profits. Is it going to fill this entire gap? Maybe. A lot of people would trade that. Aggressive people would go in on that. I'm not super aggressive when it comes to swing trading. Like I said, I want to see it. Here's the 2-day Anchored VWAP. I want to see it get below that maybe over a course of a couple days. and see how it responds to now retesting other levels. So like the 115 area, this might not be 115 in the coming days, right? Depending on, those are volume weighted average prices anchored off of just certain areas. And the fact that they're above one another, shorter to longer time frame, that tells you as long as they maintain that, you're confirming you're still in an uptrend, right? It could crush all the way through and just give it all up. But what is it going to do if it meets these levels, right? Is there going to be buyers down there? And that's what I want to look for, wherever those numbers come in at. So let's move on to a couple other stocks here. Let's see our meta. Yeah, it's been getting a little bit of pushback every time it gets above the 720s, right? You can kind of see it. Every time it gets up there, sell off. 120 or 720 again, sell off, buys back. But it's resilient. It's been very resilient. So I'm going to maintain my hold in that, and that kind of falls in line as a good example of what I like to see with these anchored VWAPs. Now, eventually, at some point, it's either got to give or it's going to, give or go, right? So I want to see it trade through with some conviction. If it's not, and we start, I'm going to start putting a stop in this, and a lot of people probably will when we start talking about previous day's lows. I'll probably be early to exit on one of those. Ideally, hopefully it's above where I entered at the 704 level, and at least get a little bit of profits. It's not going to be my ideal goal, but I'm not going to give it up either. So, GE stock, let's see where that's at. So yeah, see how it's kind of consolidating in between these areas, right? So the 2-day anchored and the weekly time frame, it came down, it met that, and we started to see a little bit of bounce. Now ideally, right, you want to see it get back above the 2-day anchored VWAP and continue to move higher, or just continue to consolidate. But again, I'll be putting on, I'm not going to just hang around and wait forever. If this starts to give up and starts to even get back below this area, I'll risk it down to whatever this comes in at, but I want to see it maintain those levels on the daily time frame, and ideally scaling out or in, depending on what it's looking at on a shorter time frame. Palo Alto Networks, same thing. It's kind of gapped up, holding that sideways move. If you look at it from an RSI and MACD standpoint, those are just indicators. They're not my end-all, be-all. But I'm not fully convinced of the continuation yet. We could see, and again, it's kind of weird timing because I think earnings are on the 13th. The 1 week anchored versus the 2 week anchored is not convincingly above yet, right? It's meeting to cross, and that's going to be a good, a point of conviction potentially. Depending, the stock price is going to be dependent on what it's going to do, right? But ideally, I want to see that above that, and then I want to see a retest into whatever those levels start to convene at, and then I'll be looking for entries if it maintains. Obviously, earnings might reset this whole chart. If it gaps way up or gaps way down, these points become meaningless. So right now they're kind of just based off of that 1 day, or that 2 weeks ago on that Monday. It happens to be that Monday of when there was a lot of volatility in the markets. So it works out pretty good because all the stocks kind of reacted pretty crazy. When you have events like that move such large stocks in whatever direction, that becomes a day where it kind of, what I look at is like you reset the market that day. Now, does that take away all considerations for even longer time frames, 52-week highs, low? No. But in a short time frame, it's going to reset these levels that are going to be points of confluence. And so far, it's certain stocks have gone to those areas and reacted. ANET, let's see what's going on. Did I already look at this one? Yeah, I did. JPM. So let me show you what I saw on JPMorgan. So again, we are convincingly across. You saw when it started across and the volume pressure continued. MACD, everything else kind of coincides with it, right? But it's reacting to volume weighted average price. Strong move into the close of last week, and now we're in kind of a pullback. But really, like I said, even if you took a Fibonacci, right, you're probably at a 50% pullback. So now the real question is, what are we going to do from here? Are we going to bounce again? Are we going to just, start to move higher? Are we going to go sideways? Ideally, I don't want it to break any of those. That red line is kind of my end-all, be-all. But it's near there. So pretty steep pullback for the morning. A lot of people, may disagree with me, and that's fine. Everyone has their own views. I know what's worked for me in the past, and hopefully it continues to work in the future, right? So yeah, I want to see it, over the course of a few days. What are we going to do in here? But ideally, we're kind of setting up into this point of, are we going to break lower or are we going to break higher? And again, look at it, zoom out. Everyone always tries to guess tops. Well, Meta sold off pretty aggressive a couple days ago, right? It was at 720 and it had this huge wick on the day down to like 701 or something. But meanwhile, look at it, it's maintained, right? Let's pull it up, see what I'm talking about. Now, JPMorgan doesn't identically move like Meta, right? But look at this, right? A lot of people would see that on an hourly time frame or even the end of the day, and you're thinking, oh, this thing's going to get hammered tomorrow. Well, it's resilient. Comes right back up, or a higher high, a higher low, right, over the course of a couple of days, talking the hourly time frames. Yeah, it's just, you can't try and guess the tops. You got to let the stock work a little bit, see where it goes from there. But that you never know. So I think I've pulled up pretty much everything. Oh, SSNC, this has been a really hot one as well. Yeah, it's just, but you can see it's pretty extended, right? Now, does that mean it's not going to continue? No, it definitely could, just like I just mentioned. I'm not going to try and guess the top, nor am I going to buy the top either. I want to see it come back to a point of, interest. Let's just move the gap to here, right? We'll call that a low. And it bounced off that, right? Wherever you move it, but you can see it didn't change too much, right? It's the same kind of concept. You could either just see it from price action or you can see it from the Anchored VWAP, whatever it may be. Let's put it on the previous low even from a few days ago. I kind of like going off the lows to see how it's doing. So obviously there was a point of test at 85.62 and it's bounced pretty hard. But all other things considered, it's pretty extended. Ideally, I don't like to buy RSI when it's, on a higher time frame, daily or whatever, when it's just up in the 80s overbought. I want to see that cool off. And generally that means, does that mean price cools off too? No, the price still might be 87.30. But I want to see things start to, again, go sideways like you see in here, and then we see higher. Generally, does that mean the price is going to sell off huge? No, it only pulled back a little bit. But, right, it's still putting in higher highs, and then as everything starts to cool, and then we start to grind and then gap higher, right? So it's a little extended for my liking. Something to day trade for sure if it continues any volatility, but it's not. It's moving under $1, throughout the day, or a couple, a little bit more than $1. But we'll see how it plays out. I want to see it come back, maybe get a little retest. Right now it's pretty extended, and so far we're in a range still, 87.57 and 85.37, right? That's technically the range post gap. So what are we going to do in between that? Are we going to just immediately break out of it? I don't anticipate that. It could, but I think you need to have some sort of big driver to do that. It could consolidate up there for weeks, days, whatever, and then finally break. And that would be a point, and you'll see it, the crossover with the other indicators, right, when they start to align like that. So for me, it's a little extended. I probably wouldn't be entering anything pretty soon, unless something really weird, happens or convinces me to be in it. So that being said, those are my watches. Let me know what you guys are watching, what you think. I appreciate any feedback, comments, like, subscribe. If you want to check out my day trading stuff, go to my Patreon. Have a good night. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon.